Welcome to Horror Shuffle.
Ow! Who's that I see walking in these woods? Why, it's Jack Nicholson. Oh, jeez. Hello, welcome to episode 3 of Horror Shuffle, a podcast where I watch and talk about horror movies at random. My name is Ryan. So far I've done Friday the 13th and Dolls. Today I'm talking about Wolf from 1994, starring Jack Nicholson, James Spader, Michelle Pfeiffer, Christopher Plummer, Kate Nelligan, and David Hyde Pierce. Directed by Mike Nichols, who also directed The Graduate, Working Girl, Regarding Henry, The Birdcage, Silkwood, and Heartburn, which also starred Jack Nicholson. It was written by Jim Harrison, who also wrote Legends of the Fall. I remember watching that movie in a class in high school. I think history class. It was also written by Wesley Strick, who also wrote Arachnophobia, Cape Fear, and the 2010 Nightmare on Elm Street, all of which will be covered on this podcast. He also wrote a movie that I like called The Glass House. It's not perfect, but I still enjoy it. IMDb also says that he did script revisions for Batman Returns, which also, of course, starred Michelle Pfeiffer. I think I first watched this movie on Cinemax or HBO or some pay channel. It's a fun movie. I always enjoy Jack Nicholson. James Spader is awesome, and of course Michelle Pfeiffer. I almost had more of a crush on her in this movie than as Catwoman in Batman Returns. Oh, and again, I am going to assume that anyone listening to this has watched this movie. So, yeah, if you haven't watched it, it's probably better to watch it first and then listen. All right, let's unpack this movie, or maybe I should say unwolfpack. Oh boy.
Shit, Mom, I'm sorry you said that.
All right, so the movie starts with the Columbia logo, which kind of gets swept away with this eerie fog, which is a cool opening. Or actually, clouds, I guess. I said fog. Then we get the title of the movie with the O in wolf becoming a full moon, which, how could you resist doing that in a Wolfman movie? The music in this movie is done by Ennio Morricone, who did a lot of great themes from movies like The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, John Carpenter's The Thing, a lot of Tarantino movies, most of them actually. Just so many good movies. I'm sure if you've watched enough movies at all, or any significant amount, you've heard his work. So we see a car driving down a snowy road, and we see that Jack Nicholson is the driver, which of course makes me think of the beginning of The Shining when the car is driving. And as I was watching the scene, I kept going, but unlike that movie, Jack Nicholson is in the car alone. You could, I guess, say a lone wolf.
Shit, Mom, I'm sorry you said that.
Yeah, I know. All right. So suddenly he hits a lone wolf, and that was in the middle of the road, and he gets out and he pokes the wolf with a stick, thinks it's dead, and when he's not looking, the wolf opens an eye and then closes it again, as if it's playing a game or just playing dead. It's almost comedic in a way. And then Jack, or, well, should I say Will, because his character's name is Will Randall. So Will goes to move the wolf, and suddenly the wolf bites his arm and runs away into the woods. And then we see 4 other wolves watching him. It's a cool shot because they blend in so well with the trees and darkness. Will is then like, I'm getting the hell out of here, gets in his car and drives away as fast as he can. Then we cut to Will in his bathroom looking in the mirror, and he sees written in the fog on the mirror, "I know what you did last summer," and a paw print. Now, Actually, his wife is in the shower, and we find out that he just made some kind of deal. Then she comes out of the shower, they start kissing, but then he sees in a mirror that she's a haggard old rotting corpse. Wait, sorry, wrong movie. Alright, so Will goes to work, and we meet his secretary, Mary, and Roy, played by David Hyde Pierce. And we find out that Will is the senior editor of a publishing company, but is worried that he's going to be fired, and Mary and Roy and a writer named Maud support him by saying that they'll go too if he's fired. Then we meet Will's protege, Stuart, played by James Spader, who also says he'll go with Will if he's fired. So James Spader's first role was in the movie Endless Love, which I mentioned in the first episode of this podcast because Walt Gorney, who played Crazy Ralph in Friday the 13th, was in Endless Love. He played a passerby. And so, yeah, that was James Spader's first role. And now that brings me to this next part where Will goes to his doctor, and his doctor's name is Ralph. So that makes this 3 movies in a row with a character named Ralph, because in the movie Dolls, the main character's name is Ralph. So yeah, I don't know. Let's see how long we can keep this going. Now, unlike Crazy Ralph, Dr. Ralph dismisses Will's story about a wolf in Vermont. So I feel like if this guy was in Friday the 13th, he'd be like, oh no, yeah, have fun at camp. There's no death curse or anything. Dr. Ralph has a funny line in more ways than one. He says he gave a rabies shot to his wife's sister-in-law who got bit in the ass by a raccoon. But yeah, he says my wife's sister-in-law. Wouldn't that be his sister? Am I crazy?
My wife's sister-in-law up in Oneonta. A raccoon chased her up on her porch and bit her in the ass.
I don't know. Maybe it's medical jargon. Who knows? So Will goes to a party at the house of Mr. Alden, played by Christopher Plummer. He is the guy who is buying the publishing company. And in one scene, you can see a painting in the background of 3 people and a giraffe. And at first, I thought it looked like the people were holding a book and the giraffe is trying to read it too. But I looked it up, and it's a painting by Swiss painter Jacques Laurent Agasse. And the people are holding some type of dish or bowl, perhaps, I guess. Perhaps with water. Anyway, I kind of want this painting. It's weird and cool. I also checked, and another painting of his of a zebra is in another scene, and also a cheetah. So obviously Mr. Alden is a big fan of Jacques Laurent Agasse. So Will meets meets Mr. Alden outside, and it turns out he isn't fired, but sort of reassigned to a less desirable position. They approach some horses, and the horses start acting very skittish. Yes, skittish. Shout out to my 9th grade communication skills vocabulary workshop book. For some reason, I remember certain words from that book, like adage, jostle, skittish, churlish, plebeian, discordant, plaudits, and citadel. I don't know why, I always remember them. They pop in my head from time to time. That's like the only thing I remember from high school, pretty much. That, and Cyrus McCormick invented the mechanical reaper, and Eli Whitney invented the cotton gin. Anyway, sorry, so the horses start acting scared, and around them are these big tall hedges, which, of course, again, reminds me of The Shining. It'd be cool if that was intentional, but, yeah, I don't know. Probably not. So, yeah, the horses are acting weird. Then Will starts feeling ill and wanders away and meets Laura, Mr. Alden's daughter, played by Michelle Pfeiffer. And as they talk, it's clear that she at least finds him interesting. Before he leaves, he has a dizzy spell and almost faints and holds his hands up to catch himself, and his hands end up on her breasts. She asks if he did it intentionally, and he then realizes where his hands are and seems embarrassed. And yeah, I don't think he did do it intentionally, but you could argue that maybe that was part of the wolf taking over. I don't know. Anyway, as he leaves, Laura notices the horse is acting strangely and seems puzzled. The following day, Will sleeps like all day and wakes up feeling incredible. There's a scene where he looks at his hand where he was bitten, and there's hair growing around the wound, which he trims. And we also find out that Stuart, who was supposedly supporting Will, actually begged for and got Will's job, the whole time acting like he didn't know. Kind of like a wolf in sheep's clothing, you could say. Will... oh boy. Will goes to work, and we discover that his sense of smell is incredibly enhanced. And it reminds me of Liar Liar, when Jim Carrey's character goes to work and can't lie to his coworkers. Or in What Women Want, when Mel Gibson's character can hear every woman's thoughts. Speaking of What Women Want, that reminds me of when that movie came out. I remember my uncles made plans to go see that movie, and I don't know if they thought they would get some kind of like information or something, but I remember they wanted to go see that movie. They like never went to the movie theaters, but yeah, they wanted to see that. Will also discovers that he can see better and hear better. Then, when he gets home, he smells Stuart's scent on his wife's bathrobe and goes to Stuart's place, bites Stuart's hand, and runs upstairs and finds his wife. Then he leaves without a word, and it's a cool scene because as he's waiting for Stuart to answer the door, he starts pacing back and forth it's very wolf-like. Then, now, I said he runs up the stairs, but it's actually more like he leaps up the stairs, of course, like a wolf. And, yeah, I mean, the biggest mistake Will makes in this movie is biting Stuart, which, we find out later that he becomes a wolf. And I find it funny that Charlotte, Will's wife, makes a stew for them to eat and tells him there's leftover stew for him. Meanwhile, she's off with a different stew. So, I don't know, that's just kind of funny. It's like a play on words that, I don't know, probably wasn't intentional, but I don't know. It's kind of funny. So, Will decides he's going to start his own company and gets Mary and Roy to help him. Will goes to Mr. Alden's mansion and tells him he's turning down the offer. He then sees Laura, played by Michelle Pfeiffer, riding a horse, and as he gets closer, the horse gets spooked and Laura falls off the horse and lands on the ground. Then, a bunch of cats run over to her and start... Wait, sorry, wrong movie. Mr. Alden then approaches them and tells them that Laura's expected to join him and some others for lunch, but she lies and tells her father that she has plans with Will, and her father says,
It doesn't really matter to Laura what your name is, Mr. Randall. What is important to her is that you're unemployed and inappropriate, and I don't approve of you.
So they go to the guest house where Laura stays, and she reveals that all she has is peanut butter and jelly, and Will delivers a line that only Jack Nicholson could deliver.
Are you serious? Peanut butter and jelly's mother's milk to me.
So, as Will and Laura are talking, we find out that Laura's mother died when she was a kid, and her brother died a year ago. Will tells her about the wolf and how it seems to have passed on some of its spirit into him. He spends the night after having a spell similar to the previous night, and during the night he starts transforming, kind of. He's got more hair, bushier sideburns. His hair is more like a mane. He's like Wolverine or Hugh Jack Nicholson. Oh boy. Oh shit, now I'm upsetting the horses. His canine teeth are sharper and larger, and his eyes appear to be more animal-like. According to IMDb, Jack Nicholson has an allergy to spirit gum, which is an adhesive that's used to bond hair and other things to the skin, which, of course, you definitely would use in a werewolf kind movie. But Rick Baker, the makeup artist, didn't exactly take Nicholson seriously and accidentally used a bottle of spirit gum on Nicholson when he was applying makeup to him. And the following day, Nicholson showed up with swells all over his face. And so, Rick Baker then took him seriously and didn't do that again. So after Will transforms, he stalks, chases, catches, and kills a deer in the woods. Now, this scene is parodied in an episode of Seinfeld where Jerry shaves his chest, and when it starts growing in again, it becomes itchy to the point where he can't take it, and he gets off the bus he's on, which, of course, is Kramer's Peterman reality tour bus. And he runs through the woods, much like Will in this scene. He doesn't kill a deer, though, just scratches his chest and kind of howls at the moon.
Ooh, that feels good.
Alright, anyway, Will wakes up and heads straight to his car and visits Dr. Ralph again, who says he was just probably sleepwalking. Will meets Mr. Alden, who's with his lawyer. His lawyer looked familiar, so I looked him up and realized he's the asshole father in Halloween 6, The Curse of Michael Myers. He also plays a cop in the episode of Seinfeld where Jerry's apartment is robbed. I hope a lot of listeners are also Seinfeld fans, because that's going to be a common thing. And if you're not, then, well, you should be. Anyway, Mr. Alden, impressed with Will's tactics of getting authors to leave the company, gives Will his old job back. Will then visits an expert in, I guess, human possession by animals? And this character's name is Dr. Alizeus, and we find out from him the day Will was bitten, the moon was the closest to our planet in 100 years. He gives Will an amulet that is supposed to help keep the wolf, the inner wolf, or as he calls it, demon wolf, under control. He offers it as a gift, but hopes that he will do him a favor and bite him because he found out he is dying. Will apologizes and says he just can't do it. Anyone listening, I'm curious, would you do it? I think I would. Let me know what you think. Email me at horrorshufflepod@gmail.com. I feel like a lot of people would maybe have an issue with this whole amulet thing, because it is kind of silly, and yeah, it's probably my least favorite part about this movie, but I don't know, I guess it's not that weird, or I don't know. I guess we got to have something that keeps him from fully turning into a wolf at times. So, yeah, I don't know what else you would do. So, Will doesn't actually put the amulet on and goes out again and ends up at the zoo. 2 police officers attempt to arrest him, one of which is David Schwimmer, who played this little role a few months before Friends first aired, making him, of course, a big star. Will jumps up over a wall and escapes, and then shortly is approached by some muggers who try to rob him. But then, this lady with a bunch of pigeons throws birdseed at the muggers and... Wait, no. Sorry, wrong movie. But I believe it is the same place from Home Alone 2 where this part was filmed. So actually, Will attacks them, and one of them runs away terrified. The next day, Will officially signs a new contract, and then I love when Will tells Stuart. He approaches Stuart in the bathroom at work, shows him the new contract he signed, tells Stuart he's fired, and as Stuart starts arguing with Will, he turns at the urinal and starts peeing on Stuart's shoes and says,
I'm just marking my territory, and you got in the way.
And then Stuart is like, nice, real nice, suede shoes. And Will says, asparagus. He enjoys his victory briefly because he then finds a couple of severed fingers in his coat pocket belonging to one of the muggers from the previous night. He runs into Charlotte, who begs him to take her back, but he sends her away. He then takes the amulet and puts it on and handcuffs himself to a radiator. Laura cons a housekeeper into letting her into Will's apartment and uses a paperclip to open the handcuffs. They end up having sex, and we see Will going out again to howl at the moon and scare some people while doing so. He does return to his, let's just say den now. And in the morning, some detectives, one of which is the great Richard Jenkins, who you would know he was Dale's father in Step Brothers, the psychiatrist in There's Something About Mary. He was in Cabin in the Woods, and recently he played Jeffrey Dahmer's father in the Netflix series Dahmer. Also, I always mistakenly think that Richard Jenkins played Ted's dad in Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure. But yeah, that is a different person. So the detectives inform Will that his wife was killed during the night, and of course they make it seem like he might have done it. But Laura tells the detective that she was with him all night. Will does question whether he is responsible for Charlotte's death. Laura notices dirt and mud on Will's shoes, and the detective calls and tells her that they messed up the DNA samples from Charlotte's crime scene because it showed canine DNA. So then Laura starts to believe that something could be going on with Will. He had asked her to lock him up before, and after what she learned, she agrees and locks him behind a cage in the barn. Laura goes in to give a statement to the detectives, and she runs into Stuart, who is also meeting with the detectives, most likely to make Will look guilty of his wife's murder. We then see that Stuart is also turning into a demon wolf from when Will bit him. Like I said, that was the biggest mistake Will makes in this movie. Now, James Spader was in the movie Wall Street, so I kind of wish that Wolf of Wall Street was a sequel to this and Wall Street. Anyway, Laura figures it out and asks Stuart if he was bit, and he says, "What an odd question." So I think he knows that she knows. Laura then heads home, planning to get away with Will. Stuart tells the detectives about his affair with Charlotte and that Will bit him and urinated on his shoes, and just makes Will sound guilty. Stuart realizes that Laura is gone and goes after her, and Detective Bridger, who is Richard Jenkins, probably ad-libbed this line.
Did he say on his shoe or in his shoe?
When Laura gets home, she tells their security guard not to let anyone in, but when Stuart gets there, he runs the guard over and drives right through the gate. Stuart is stopped by another guard, and he attacks him, biting his neck. Laura trips over the guard's body and is then confronted by Stuart, but eventually gets away by kneeing him in the groin.
Wolfman's gone mad!
She then sprays him with a fire extinguisher and hits him with it. He leaps up and pounces on her next to Will's cage. Will then takes the amulet off, which apparently was working, and he starts to wolf out. Stuart continues attacking Laura, and I think his intention is to sexually assault Laura in front of Will, but thankfully Will leaps up over the cage and he pounces onto Stuart, and then the two of them fight, and it's a cool fight. Will then throws Stuart onto the cement steps leading up to the house. Stuart rolls down the steps, but not all of them. And yes, I'm gonna do it. I'm sorry, but how could I not?
That man is a step skipper.
So, for any non-Seinfeld fans or anyone unfamiliar with this particular episode of Seinfeld that James Spader was in, he played a character who, was an alcoholic and going through the 12-step program, and he was on step 9, where you apologize to people, and he refused to apologize to George, and so George called him a step skipper. And this movie, or this scene in this movie, is perfect with him because I counted the steps going up to the house, and there are actually 12 steps. And so, and I was hoping that he would have landed on the 9th step, which is the step he was on in the Seinfeld episode. But it wasn't quite that one. All right. Anyway, Will leaves him because he seems to be unconscious and starts walking away. Stuart then gets back up, grabs a pair of garden shears, and leaps up to attack Will with them when Laura shoots him dead. Laura, still a little startled by Will's appearance, takes his hand, or paw, and they have a moment before Will takes off into the woods. When police get there, Laura pretends to have been in her little guest house the whole time, and she says she doesn't know where Will is. She also asks Detective Bridger if he would like a drink, and says perhaps another vodka tonic, and she says she can smell it. So she obviously was bitten, probably when her and Will were in bed together. Although I did read that some people believe that she was actually the wolf that bit Will to begin with, but I'm saying no because then she would have been changing too all the other nights. The movie ends with Will presumably fully becoming a wolf like we saw in the beginning, and it fades out with a close-up of Laura's eyes looking like a wolf's eyes. So I'm not sure if Will just stay like a wolf now, and eventually Laura too, or if he can kind of go back and forth, like go back to work, or like... Now, the publishing company will have to hire a new senior editor because if Will's a wolf and Stuart's dead, now, there's I guess maybe David Hyde Pierce would get it. Or, of course, his character, I mean. Okay, so a few more things. In the dinner party scene with all the cool paintings near the beginning of the movie, Allison Janney is in that scene, and Allison Janney you would know probably from Juno. She plays Juno's mother, and also in the movie 10 Things I Hate About You, she plays the teacher who's writing the kind of smutty novel. But yeah, she has a very small role as a party guest in that scene. Also, Lisa Emery is credited as a party guest, and Lisa Emery, if you've watched Ozark, she plays Darlene Snell in Ozark, which she's great in that. That's a great show too. But yeah, she is a guest in that scene. And then a couple things about Jim Harrison, the original writer of this film. He actually ended up leaving because of creative differences with the director and another writer, and he actually ended up not liking the film as it turned out, and supposedly went out into the woods and went to where a den of wolves was and apologized to them for the film. I'm not 100% sure about Jim. He seems like, let's just say very eccentric. Apparently, Jim first kind of got the idea for this because, according to him, he was at his cabin and had a, as he described it, lunar psychosis, in which he grew hair on it all over his body and grew an animal-like snout, and like his dog was scared of him for like a few days. So yeah, the writer of this movie seems to think that he actually turned into a werewolf. So yeah, I don't know. Another thing about Jim Harrison, the cabin that he was at was in Grand Marais, which is just like a couple of hours from where I am right now. And actually, there's I live near Marquette, Michigan, which is the biggest city in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. And there's a hotel in Marquette called the Landmark Inn. Now, the Landmark Inn has a few like suites named after famous people that have stayed there. Like there's an Amelia Earhart suite, there's an Abbott and Costello suite, and there's a Jim Harrison suite. Yes, there's a suite named after the writer of this movie in the city that I live close to. So I think if I ever stay there, I think I'm going to have to stay in the Jim Harrison suite. And who knows what might happen. So in the last 2 episodes, I did a thing with anagrams with actors and names and stuff, but I couldn't really find anything fun with this one. So I did something else. And it started because David Hyde Pierce, of course, was on Frasier with John Mahoney, and John Mahoney was a member of the Steppenwolf Theater. So then I looked to see if anyone else worked with people who, well, if anybody in this movie actually was a Steppenwolf Theater actor, and none of them were, but James Spader worked with Glenn Headley, who was in 2 Days in the Valley and was a member of the Steppenwolf Theater. Tim Hopper was in Frankie and Johnny with Michelle Pfeiffer and was a member of Steppenwolf Theater. And also Kate Nelligan, who played Charlotte, Will's wife, was also in Frankie and Johnny. Christopher Plummer worked with Joan Allen doing voices for the Elder Scrolls V Skyrim, and Joan Allen was a member of Steppenwolf. K. Todd Freeman, a member of Steppenwolf, was in One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, of course, with Jack Nicholson. So all the main members of the cast worked with people who were Steppenwolf theater members. It's a little embarrassing how much time I spent figuring this out, but I don't know, sometimes I get going on these little things and I can't stop. Jack Nicholson, Michelle Pfeiffer, and Richard Jenkins all were in The Witches of Eastwick, which I've never seen, but we'll probably watch someday. In fact, it is a horror movie, so I should probably put it on the list. Okay, so now I'm going to do my questions that I do at the end of each episode. And the first question is, what character would you play or be cast as? And I think I would have to say I'd kind of like to be the guard who gets run over by Stewart. I think that'd be fun, and it'd be, I don't know, a memorable thing. All right, question 2. What is your favorite line? I was going to say when Detective Bridger says, did he say urinate on his shoe or in his shoe? But actually, I think it would have to be when Will tells Stewart that I'm just marking my territory and you got in the way. So it's actually the part where he does urinate on his shoes. Question 3, what is your favorite gag? Well, I think it's when Will tells the guy who he smelled tequila on his breath that he shouldn't tell people that he put a drop of tequila in his coffee when he didn't have coffee. And then the guy picks up the phone and like looks underneath it and then like looks up at the ceiling, and because he's like thinking like, how the fuck does he know that? So I think that's my favorite gag in the movie. Question 4. What is your favorite kill? Well, I think it would have to be the guard that Stewart runs over, just because it's kind of funny and just it was kind of unexpected, or well, I don't know about unexpected, but it was just cool. So yeah, I guess that's my favorite kill. Question 5. What prop would you like to own from the movie? Well, again, even though it's kind of silly, I guess the amulet that Jack wears, as much as I love the paintings that I talked about earlier that were in Alden's mansion, but yeah, I think I'll have to go with the amulet. I'll hang it in between the 4 dolls that you see at the end of Dolls and the sweater Mrs. Voorhees wears. Question 6. Which character should get a spin-off series or film? Now, I think I would just have to go with Will continuing like in a sequel or maybe a series where he uses his enhanced abilities because it's a little different from like the werewolf series that I talked about in, I think, the last episode, because in that series the main character is a werewolf, but he's just a regular guy the rest of the time. So Will has enhanced abilities even when he's not completely, transformed at night. So he could use that to his advantage to take down some, I don't know, criminal people. And yeah, I don't know. He could, he could be sort of like, pull some things like Saul Goodman does on Better Call Saul. But, yeah, instead he's, like a demon wolf. And question 7, who would be cast in a remake? So, like, if this was made today, and I'm going to base it on... I look for people who are the age now that, like, Jack Nicholson was when he was in Wolf. And I came up with a few options, and a couple would be, like, gender... like, changing the gender of the Will Randall character, and I thought maybe Lucy Lawless or Patricia Arquette would be good. Patricia Arquette, of course, played Kristen in Nightmare on Elm Street Part 3, and Lucy Lawless, of course, is Xena, and actually was in the Evil Dead TV show, Ash versus Evil Dead. And she got into that role because she's married to Evil Dead, the original film, and the series producer, Robert Tappert. So yeah, I think they would be cool. But then if we did keep it, the character as a man, Hugh Jackman is about the age that Jack Nicholson was when he was in Wolf. So yeah, that would be almost perfect. Hugh Jackman as Will Randall. And then for the Stuart Swinton role, I was thinking either Emma Roberts or Austin Butler, which that would also kind of be perfect because he could just use the sideburns that he used in the Elvis movie for Wolf. So yeah, those are my choices for the two main character roles if they did a remake. Okay, now it is time to pick a movie for the next episode. Now, for the past couple of episodes, I used dice to pick a movie, but what I did is I went to this website called Picker Wheel, and what you can do is you can add either numbers or whatever, a list of things to this wheel, and then you click on it and it'll spin, and it'll pick a random thing, whatever you typed. So I typed in over 290 movies on this picker wheel. So I'm going to push this button and it's going to spin and it's going to randomly pick a movie from the list of movies that I typed in. So let's see what happens here. I'm going to push the button. All right. The next movie is the Amityville Horror from 1979. Yes, it actually came out just like 9 days before I was born. So Amityville Horror, starring James Brolin and Margot Kidder, and directed by Stuart Rosenberg. It appears to be available on Max. So that is going to be the next movie. Okay, that is going to be it for this episode. Email me at horrorshufflepod@gmail.com. All right, thank you for listening, and I'll be right back. We see that Ennio Morricone does the voice. Yeah, he actually does all of Nicholson's lines. So far, I've done Friday the 13th. He's like Wolverine, Hugh Jackman Nicholson. Or Hugh Jack Nicholson. I fucked that up. Yeah, now it won't be funny. Yes, skittish. Shout out to my 9th grade communication skills vocabulary. Oh man, I need to go back.